Welcome to the first episode of the podcast, Shashank Redemption. I'm your host, Shashank Shekhar, CEO, entrepreneur, innovator, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. When I mentioned to my assistant, Rachel, that I was starting my podcast, her first reaction was, "Do you even have time for this?" Now, that's usually how we react when we think of doing something new. We think about working out more, reading more books, start meditating, but almost immediately convince ourselves not to pursue it. Because do I even have time for that? I mean, there are other reasons as well. I mean, we have fear of failure, fear of unknown. We don't know what trying something new will end up as. And we think that we might not succeed with that. We might get rejected. I mean, there is serious fear of rejection with humans. Maybe you feel that you will be judged for doing something unknown and new and it doesn't pan out very well and people will judge you for your failures. Now, you are not alone because through thousands of years of human evolution, we have been conditioned to fear the unknown. We have been conditioned to not try new things. I mean, imagine if you were, say, a hunter, you were a caveman and you were hunting for something thousands of years ago and you saw an animal that you have not seen before or a reptile that you have not seen before. Now, you don't know what kind of an animal or reptile that is. I mean, not trying something unknown could have resulted in you dying, really. You could have paid the ultimate price for not fearing the unknown. But then also understand that it's embracing something new, being courageous enough and being brave enough to explore the unknown, which is what has driven the human race forward. Like, imagine if we never tried something new ever again, ever in the last, say, thousands of years. We would still be caveman and cavewoman doing the same hunting and gathering that we did, say, thousands of years ago. And my entire life and whatever success I have had has been punctuated repeatedly by trying something new. And even after being a guest on, say, dozens of podcasts, starting my own is yet another example of me trying something new. So I thought the first episode of Shashank Redemption will be a perfect time to talk about what does it take to try something new and why should you do it. Now, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once said that if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. In my opinion, this one sentence ever so beautifully sums up why we are here on this planet. To yearn for our highest house of production and not to settle for anything less. In the lead up to this first episode that I'm recording, I was asked by several people, why a podcast? I mean, I have been blogging for a very long period of time. I've been writing books. But to me, starting this podcast it's my small way of reaffirming that Saint-Exupéry quote. I am trying to instill in you the yearning for the vast and endless sea of human potential. To be the CEO of an Inc. 500 company is a big deal for anyone, but the stakes can become back-wrenching for someone who began his journey from one of India's poorest villages. In the mid-80s, the place where I come from was this run-of-the-mill village where the nearest bus stand was a 2 miles walk, running water was unheard of, and electricity was a distant dream. And at the school where I went, there were no benches, and the chairs were reserved only for the teachers. The students, like us, sat on the floor. But it wasn't all doom and gloom, really. In the pastoral setting, you could see the three parallel ranges of Himalayas on a wintry morning. Its resting line of straw bales could inspire Claude Monet haystack series on a fall evening. And its summer night could arouse Van Gogh towards a starry night. I spent my first 10 years of life there, and even though the resources were limited, it was fun. I wouldn't exchange it for anything else. But even with my exceptional school grades, I was 10 and I was in the 8th grade and at the top of my class. It seemed I was destined to a life of mediocrity, much like the other kids of the village. And that's when I was thrown into trying something new for the first time. My mom thought I was too smart for that school. My mom thought I had too much potential being at the top of the class and when I was 10 and I was already in the 8th grade. And she sent me off to this one big city in India. So big that it's not just one of India's big city, it's one of the world's biggest cities. And there I was, completely out of my comfort zone, completely out of me being top of my class. And I was sent to this school where they taught everything in English. Now, English was a language where I had barely learned my alphabets just a few months back. English is my third language, actually. And so the very first day of the school, the only English sentence that I really knew was, "What is your name?" And nothing else, really. And so that fear of unknown that I was talking about, that's what I had at that time. I walk into this school fearing the fact that some kid will ask me something in English and I would not know the answer. I would not probably even understand the question in the first place. And I would embarrass myself. And imagine being so embarrassed on very first day of a school. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of the year. But thankfully that did not happen. And I struggled through the school year, trying to learn English as a language. But it worked out fine. I mean, next year I was top four in the class. So much so that I actually went to another school which used to teach William Shakespeare originals as their English course. So not just stories, but really the originals. I ended up studying 3 William Shakespeare original even before I had graduated from 10th grade. And that actually inculcated me the love for English literature for the rest of my life, so much so that I actually went to college and studied English literature for my undergraduate and came out, graduated top 10 in the university for that subject. So imagine knowing practically nothing just a few days back to actually completing a college degree in that and being almost top in the class or top 10 in the university for that. So I kind of embraced that trying something new for the very first time, and I did reasonably well. And then after that, the story just continues, is because I was working for a small company as a salesperson there, really trying to get more students into this educational institute I was working at. And my boss said, "You're really good at the sales thing. Why don't you do something which is more professional, like get a professional degree and do something better with it?" And just like that English medium school earlier, I had no idea what professional degree he was talking about or what should I be trying. And then he talked about MBA to me. He said, why don't you go ahead and get yourself an MBA? That will really catapult your professional career. And so again, not knowing much about it, I took entrance test for several top MBA schools in India. And if you know anything about India, really, usually there are almost about 1 million people that take entrance test for these schools, and less than 100 people usually get it. That's the acceptance ratio in some of the most sought after MBA schools or engineering schools or medical schools in India. But I did end up getting selected for a school that was ranked number 7 in the country. I actually got a scholarship for that. And went on to attend the school, and the same story. It was almost like a deja vu from several years back when I went to this English school. Is again, I was thrust into this MBA school where I knew nothing. I went to colleges studying English literature, and here I had all my friends and other people in the class who had studied econ, or if they were engineering graduates, or they did bachelors in business administration. So they had such a huge head start compared to me, who practically knew no subject which was being taught at the business school. But then 2 years later, I was second in the class when we graduated from there. So this is my entire emotionally taxing away from parents journey, which has started when I was super young, just 10, eventually led to an MBA from one of the best business schools in India, a very successful stint in corporate India, and finally my landing in America. So when Inc. 500 decided to write to me that I had made what is called the most exclusive club in business, it felt like a culmination of years of mental and emotional battle, neither any less demanding than the other. But what does really an Inc. 500 mean? I mean, if you think about it, especially to me, it meant a world and more, because now my company, InstaMortgage, has put itself where Oracle and Microsoft were put. And there's a reason why the Inc. 500 is hyped, really. I mean, in the 3 years period when the other economies grew at a meager rate, when most of the world economy was ravaged by pandemic, InstaMortgage registered over 1,200% growth. Now, anybody will tell you that growth is equivalent to probably 10 times the national average. But actually, it was 165 times the national average. So you have to be 165 times better than your other competition, so to say, to make that Inc. 500 list. And to put things further in perspective, that's 1 out of 12,000 companies that make that list. And we sometimes complain about acceptance rates at Harvard, Stanford, MIT, where the acceptance is actually 1 out of 20. So imagine if 1 out of 20 sounds extremely difficult, trying to make a list where you are 1 out of 12,000 companies to do that. And in all modesty, really, what makes the achievement even more noteworthy is that InstaMortgage was started at inarguably, really, the worst time for business. It was the subprime-triggered economic meltdown of 2008. And I had made up my mind to enter the mortgage business when American and probably worldwide economists, media, and the administration in general were infuriated with the loose lending guidelines and hailed the mortgage industry as the architect for the meltdown. So when the home buyers were really not buying anything, when nobody was really refinancing, nobody had a need or really the capability of buying a home, I sat on my kitchen table with $1,900 in capital, and for what it was worth, really an indomitable probably courage to start a mortgage business. And mind you, I was a year and a half in the country with really no connections. Nobody even close to where I lived. The closest relative I remember was in Canada. So, and that was just starting the business. I know it took courage to start it, but really the bigger task comes after you start the business. Starting the business itself is just the first act. And I realized about a year into the business that I was struggling, and this was something, even though I wanted to do for a long time, entrepreneurship, was not really working out for me. And that's when I read somewhere, I think it was a Jeffrey Gitmer book that said that if you want to be considered an expert, if you want people to take you seriously, you should be writing and speaking. And so I started blogging in 2009, a year after I started the business. Less than 10 people in the industry were blogging back then, I remember. And I wrote for 6 months straight, 2 times a week, and nothing really happened. for weeks and months. I kept writing, but really nothing happened. And it was after 6 months that I got my first call that somebody actually saw one of my blog posts on the web. Imagine what would you do if you kept trying something for 6 months straight, putting in several hours of preparation and work, and nothing really happened. I mean, we would probably quit. First of all, we won't even try again. Same thing, the fear of unknown, fear of trying something new, something that you have never done before. But I kept at it, and it resulted in building one of the biggest platforms for my success later on, the blogging platform. And same thing with speaking. Again, I'd done some speaking at business school, but really no real public speaking experience in front of an audience which were not my friends. And same thing happened. I mean, the first opportunity that I got was because I had sponsored an event. There were about 30 real estate agents in attendance. It was a 4-minute talk that I had to give, and I recorded myself 27 times over and over again. I tried to get it better before I could get there on the stage and speak for 4 minutes. And now I could walk into a room with thousands of people in audience with very little preparation, and I will do just about fine. And so, as you can see, it's trying something new over and over again that has really worked in my favor. Now, irrespective of talent, success has to be baptized by the strength of character and hard work. And I had resolved not to let my moral reserves fade, well, ever. For me, the only peak would have sufficed. And for the best, you pay. And going out of my comfort zone was the only currency I had. So much so that I started calling it romancing the uncomfort zone. It's like embracing it. It's like liking it. It's like falling in love with it. And you need to, and that's why romancing the uncomfort zone is what has worked. I say this because I want all you guys and girls who are thinking of doing anything really remarkable in life, whether it's entrepreneurship or something else, that success can be created without money, background, and connections. Now, this is worth repeating. You can be wildly successful without Ivy League schooling, boatloads of cash, or powerful connection. Yes, you will hit blind walls, face insurmountable cliffs, and maybe receive cruel initial blows. But really, I mean, you will see that the roads will open, fissure will erupt in solid walls, and time will give you a look in. And if opportunity is when luck meets preparation, I hope this podcast will help you get as prepared as you ever can be. Now, even if we talk about behavioral scientists or people who are neuroscientists, they will tell you that when you seek novelty, when you try something new, several things are going on in your brain. First of all, you're creating new synaptic connections with every new activity you engage in. These connections actually build on each other, increase your neural activity, creating even more connections to build other connections. New learning is taking place. New learning also triggers the release of dopamine, which motivates us, which in turn leads to neurogenesis or creation of new neurons and new neural connections. So, as you can see, whether you base it on science or common sense or just take my word for it, trying new things and continuing to learn and challenge ourselves widens our perspectives and brings numerous physical, cognitive, and emotional benefits. Plus, sometimes it's just plain fun. Talking of fun, it was at 15,000 feet. My gears double-checked, my fears embraced, and I readied myself for the first free fall. My first skydive. Cold wind slapped my face in a near zero temperature. It was biting, exciting, scary, thrilling, and a feeling of you are going to die all at the same time. And again, that's something that we don't try, right? I mean, we think of a skydive and think the fear of unknown. We don't know how it will pan out. And if you haven't experienced that most adrenaline-pumping 79 seconds of my life, at least, because of fear, here is a fact that might help. According to United States Parachuting Association, there are an estimated 3 million jumps that happen per year, and the fatality count is only 21. That's a 0.0007% chance of dying from a skydive compared to a 0.016 chance of dying in a car accident. So imagine that. You're just driving around, going to your work. Your chances of dying is so much higher than free falling from 15,000 feet with nothing but a hope that the parachute will work somewhere down the road. In layman's term, really, we are about 24 times more likely to die in a car accident than in a skydiving one. Fear breeds negativity. It is the opposite of hope, optimism, and positivity. When we become negative in our mindset, we allow our imagination to show us the worst possibilities. In the end, most of such possibilities don't show up. What if we lose in the process, though, is our peace of mind, and with it, our ability to execute strategies and important decisions. Think about this fact for a moment, is that your body, biologically, you are becoming a new you every few months. We have about 330 billion cells that are replaced daily in our body. That's equivalent to about 1% of all our cells. So in about 100 days, we replace almost 30 trillion cells. That's an equivalent of new you. So whether you think of this as a biological phenomena or you believe in some higher self or say God, whether you think of it as a he, she, or it, I'm not here to really talk about religion. But what I'm saying is that whether you think of it as a biological phenomena or a divine phenomena, but you are being created a new you every few months, every few weeks. So if the entire you can be new every few months, there's no reason for you to fear trying something new, which is a very small part of the entire you. Now I'll wrap up with this. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. On that Mark Twain quote, I'd like to wrap up episode 1 of Shashank Redemption, this podcast with your host, Shashank Shekhar. Hope you enjoyed it and will catch me on episode 2.